11 a.m. Morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Williams. I'm Marketing Manager at Whitespace. Welcome to our community meetup. This meetup is usually on the ground, but like many businesses, we've had to pivot ourselves onto online. So this is episode 1 of a series of webinars. Planned for the next 45 minutes to an hour is that I will be handing over to Zena Cox, who will be hosting the panel session. You are able to ask questions, and please do feel free to, because this will work better if we get your questions in. So we've got some pre-prepared ones, but obviously please feel free to ask your questions, because at the moment it's about a subject which I think is on everyone's mind: how you pivot yourself and your team out of the office successfully onto online. So anyway, I'll hand over to Zena. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks to Whitespace for organising the event and inviting IdeasUK to be part of this discussion. As Lauren mentioned, I'm Zena Cox and I'm the Operations Director for IdeasUK. For those of you who are not familiar with IdeasUK, we're a not-for-profit network organisation whose purpose is to support an organisation's sustainability through the power of innovative thinking. Through the diversity of our network, we support organisations to accelerate their innovation capabilities, inspiring a culture of inclusion and positive change, where we harness the power of our place. So today's topic talks to the connection and collaboration, the work from home revolution. I know in my lifetime, we have never lived through anything like the situation we face today. In these unprecedented times, how organisations stay connected and collaborate with each other has gained even greater importance. Businesses have had to move from office-based working, where in the world of innovation, regular face-to-face meetings and co-creation through brainstorming is an everyday occurrence, to using the latest technology to enable digital collaboration and ongoing productivity, all whilst working from home. I guess personally, we're all striving to develop a new work-home life balance, with additional family commitments and other external pressures, yet still needing to evolve how we work effectively. And yet against this chaotic and, for some of us, traumatic backdrop, the pace of innovation seems to have accelerated, with Nightingale hospitals not just built, but ready for operation within days, and companies developing new processes and collaborating in ways never previously seen. So how we embrace this new way of working is going to be key. And today we're delighted to bring you a range of experts to discuss the work from home revolution. So I'm going to invite each of our panelists to give a brief introduction before kicking off with some questions. So Dave, I'll come to you first. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Zena. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Grant, and I manage the customer success function for Zoom across EMEA.
Thanks, Dave. And Glenn?
Glenn McClements, CEO of Whitespace. Their job is running the Whitespace Innovation Lab.
Fabulous. Stuart?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Stuart Laws. I work for the Ministry of Defence, where I'm a member of the Innovation Unit, delivering our innovation priorities and represent for the Defence Growth Partnership. And I'm also the chairperson for IdeasUK.
Thanks. And Paul?
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me, Zena. My name is Paul Terry. I'm director of an organisation called Impulsion, and essentially we are a leadership and coaching organisation that focus specifically on emotional intelligence.
Thank you all. So I'm actually going to start this with a specific question for each panellist, just to get us started with the questions. As Lauren has already mentioned, we've got quite a large audience today, so I think most of you are on mute, but we do have both a chat function and a Q&A. So I will be keeping my eye out on those questions and will ask as many as I can to our panelists. But to start with, a few targeted questions. So Glenn, the Whitespace team, like many teams, are spread across the UK from Belfast to London with customers around the world. How do you ensure successful remote collaboration, both internally and externally?
So internally, it's actually been pretty easy for us in Whitespace. Everyone had the option to work from home. We have good tooling, collaboration tools, set and processes for dealing with remote teams or working from home teams. So that there's been actually very little disruption from day to day. Externally, it's been a bit different. We would usually use a mixture of video conferencing, but also a lot of face-to-face meetings. So that's obviously switched to just video conferencing. So I think we've been used to using 5 or 6, apologies for Zoom folks, 5 or 6 video conferencing tools throughout the day, and you just need to be flexible to whatever is that the corporates actually use. So we're going very au fait with all the tooling out there. What is different, I would actually say what has been a bit more different is actually the design sprints that we do. So from the engineering perspective, getting on, that's been the same, but a lot of the design work we do would have been a mixture of face-to-face and also like in the office. So that we have now flipped that to being completely remote, using tooling, collaborative design tooling, and actually working with our clients to whiteboard, storyboard, prototype in real time, but using collaborative design tools. Zena, you're on mute.
I'm going to stay just on volume the whole time to be on the safe side now. Stuart, can you talk us through some of the changes to the way you're operating from your innovation program within the Ministry of Defence and how you've adapted to this new way of working?
I think as an organisation, Defence is relatively lucky in that we're used to working in different scenarios and environments, sometimes at a moment's notice with our operations. So what we have noticed is that operational mindset just kicked in overnight as the lockdown started. We were very clear right from the beginning that everyone within Defence would maintain the government advice and show that we were following it and not different to everybody else. The biggest problems we've had is working from home. We're a very traditional organisation where most of our people aren't kitted for remote working. So the first few weeks was a bit of a struggle to get everyone up and running so that we didn't lose the ability to support the UK government and everything else which was going on. From an innovation point of view, the Defence and Security Accelerator guys who do most of our work with industry alongside IdeasUK have delivered a number of challenges where they have shortened the time frame we would normally work quite considerably. So they've delivered an innovation challenge for cleaning ambulances in the same time we would normally take to scope one of those challenges and get it out to industry. So they've delivered a whole challenge and are currently reviewing the pitches from industry, ready to select potential winners, assess them, and get those products into market as quickly as we can. So that's one of the key things for us. So it's sort of bringing that whole continuous improvement approach to everything which we're doing, while also dealing with the same problems as everybody else and taking a traditionally office-based workforce and enabling them to work from home in different ways. We are quite fortunate in some of the tools we've got, particularly the ones we use for ideas management. We've been able to adjust and tweak to support remote working as well as just capturing ideas and new innovation projects. And that's going down quite well because it's nice and agile. We can get things sorted out, and then with a quick conversation, Skype, Zoom call, whatever it is, we can then get changes to those and allow the business to carry on with what's important to them at the moment.
So it's really the pace as well of the innovation from the start of the idea all the way through to the implementation and seeing that thing or process change that sounds like it's the biggest difference for you guys.
Yeah, it's sort of the operational mentality. It's that just get it sorted. So the problem's in front of you, you solve the problem, move on to the next problem.
Yeah.
And then we do the longer term thinking when the dust settles. So everything's being captured as observations and lessons identified at the moment. So as we solve things, those things are taken into account for the next problem. And then when everything comes back to the new normal, we will review everything in slower time like we do when we come back from a big operation.
Great. And we will pick up on that new normal later in the call. So Paul, a question for you now. So obviously with your emotional intelligence background, how important important is it for us to understand and manage our emotions to ensure mentally we're really functioning effectively at this time?
So that's a really big question, Zena, but I think it's quite possibly the most important question for the time. I guess the first thing is that I think understanding our emotions is important at any time, particularly for leaders, and understanding our own and understanding those of our employees. But I think at this time, my reflection would be that this really is unprecedented times. I don't want to say that, but it's just such a different world that we're living in. And I think even if you just go back to simple things like, that we all know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we know, from basic, very basic things, people are frightened because, the things that they want to address may not be as they were. So the whole world has changed. So, when you think about basic levels of, worrying about, their work, it may well be that the partner, has got work challenges, or has been furloughed. The nature of what they're doing at home is very different. They may have children, they're thinking about, are the shelves stocked? So there's a lot going on for all of us right now. And of course that challenges how we respond, because I think traditionally we are programmed for fight or flight, and dealing with fear, I think, is a big challenge to the way that we respond. And I think leaders, with our team, helping them understand what the future looks like, and people deal with concrete concepts. And I guess we're living now in a world that we don't know what the future holds. Things are very different, things are exciting. And of course, organisations are worrying about their normal operations and are very keen to move on very quickly. And of course, if you think about concepts like the grief cycle, which is of course a change cycle. People go through that denial process, and some frustration, anger, and some acceptance. And I think organisations are quickly looking to dealing with things. And I think the danger potentially with that is that whilst we want to move on and move our business forward, we have to also understand where our people are, and what's really going on with them at home. What is the challenge? If we are, for instance, so I guess it's about being empathetic, isn't it, to the situation, and understanding ourselves, being empathetic of ourselves as leaders, to understand actually that people may be looking to us for answers that simply we can't necessarily provide, and we're looking and trying to help people find those answers. But when you think about it, working in this way, in a virtual and remote way, then relationships are very different. So actually the subtle positive strokes that you may get through interaction at work, just a little acknowledgement or a look or a conversation that you have by the coffee station, isn't going to be there. And so obviously if we're into virtual meetings, we're talking about what needs to be done to get the business moved forward. I think we just have to be aware of where our people are and whether they're ready to get to that place, or even whether they're, how they feel about sharing what's going on for them in their world. Because actually, whilst we're talking, you could have a child that's running across the background, and actually the person that's the normal graceful swan, at work and very professional and dressed immaculately, is all of a sudden revealed to be in strain. And that's a difficult one, I think, for all of us to cope with. So I think there's a lot going on, and I think the first thing I would do is check in with ourselves, understand our own feelings and view, and take some time to understand others and give them time to express how they're feeling, and think about the purpose of our conversations. And maybe it isn't all about the business, it's about people and helping people come to terms with their situation.
Thanks, Paul. And I think we all are a bit on a roller coaster. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. So checking in where we are at each point in time is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. So Dave, question for you. And I guess this is a fairly practical question, but I think one we could probably all do with a little bit of advice on. So you're chairing a meeting online for 20 people. from your home office, of course, these days. What are your top tips on how to prepare and deliver a meeting? And how do you reassure people that actually what they discuss is going to be confidential too?
Got it. So some great information has just come from the panelists here as well. Really important points that we've touched on. And the once normal or this new normal, it's an ever-changing piece. So I think first things first, focus on always the message that you're trying to achieve, and then step back and look at the environment within which you're working. You know, are you set up for success? Do you have a good setup with lighting and what have you? Because it's the frictionless video that we're really proud to deliver as we've become the platform of choice globally now, not just in corporates, but in private lives, because those lines are really merging. And that's, again, to Paul's point, it's become a real challenge for people. So are you set up for success? Do you have a good space in which to have your call? Is your audio going to be okay? So take those few moments to test the audio devices. You know, on this call now, we're all using a multitude of different pieces, all using computer audio, interestingly. Check that the webcam's great. It's the right angle. It's where you want it to be. You know, there's not a lot I can do to improve the way I look, but I'll try. You know, get some good lighting. You can use the Zoom touch up your appearance filter if you need to. So just check first of all, because for many of us this is new, but not for all of us. And then of course the chaos in the background is the challenging piece. So take away any of the doubt and concern. Make sure that your webcam is positioned properly so you can see and look great. Make sure your lighting is as complementary as you wish it to be. Make sure that your audio device is straightforward and easy to use. Take the time to get used to muting and unmuting yourself. Right now, as I say, we're all on computer audio. Use the great functionality like the hotkeys to press the space bar to unmute yourself and then let go of the space bar again to stay muted. Calls like that just make it a bit easier, you know, especially to Paul's point, if you're at home and suddenly the kids come charging through, be muted all the time. And if you need to speak, hit the space bar. Yeah, I got that, thanks, let go again. Takes away the stress is the first piece. Embrace the fact that this is right now a new way of working. There's some great questions coming in. How much of this will stay like this forever? We just don't know, because who knows what the next month, 3, 6, 9 months will look like right now. So first things first, set up your work environment to present effectively. Make sure you've got your messaging thought through and planned out. If you've got some talk points that you really want to get across, just jot them down somewhere nearby so that they're top of mind and you get them covered. When it comes to inviting the audience, think about who you're interacting with and how that messaging is going to be displayed, and more importantly, how the invitation is going to be displayed. So you touched on the idea of making sure that everyone feels confident and safe in this environment. There's some great tips and tricks that we can share. We have some on our blog post as well. And the product's built to be secure, always has been, and we have security well covered. So I would think about some basic pieces. As you're inviting people into your meeting, ensure that you include a password for your meeting. You can choose to embed that password into your URL link so that only those who receive the invitation can click the link and join the meeting. In addition to that, we have a waiting room functionality so that everybody that joins the meeting sits in the waiting room. And you can look one by one and say, yes, I know Zena, I'll let her in. Yep, Stuart should be here, I'll let him in. So you can manage who comes into your meeting at that point as well. And then once people are in your meeting, you also have the option to remove someone if they're in the wrong meeting as well. So you have complete control over everybody once they're in your session. You also have, you know, you talked about a larger meeting, let's say 20 people. You have the ability to mute or unmute everybody in one go. So as the presenter of the event, you have the ability to manage who can be heard, whether they have the option to unmute themselves, who can be invited, who can be permitted in, and who stays in. So you have total security. And this goes across all platforms. You know, whatever your tool of choice is, think safety and security first, as you should do with anything. If you're having a discussion in a restaurant, you would talk about appropriate content, not just far and wide and confidential content when you're surrounded by people. And in the same way, if you're having a meeting in the office, you shut the door. And think of your Zoom meeting as no different to that. If you don't want certain people to be involved or it's sensitive content, think ahead about how you wish to secure your meeting in advance. And finally, I would just say, embrace this. You know, this video, frictionless video, is really a good way to see people's emotions, to see how they're reacting, to see how they feel. You know, sometimes it's good to understand that the person you're putting a lot of pressure on right now maybe has 2 kids running around in the background, or a husband that's working next to them, or a wife that's trying to manage something else. You need to know that right now, because the days of people being laser focused just on their work ethics 9 to 5, that's changing right now. And it may come back to somewhat of a normality over time, but having that empathy to understand someone's individual situation is really going to help you get the most out of your team and of your event as you're presenting and interacting with people.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. So I've just been looking at all the questions that are coming in, and we've got quite a few already. There's a question around the tools that we've been using. Which ones are we using and for what? So maybe to Stuart first.
Yeah, no worries. So we make use of quite a lot of tools, but I'd say probably at the moment our main tools are so Office 365 as a common corporate approach to things. So that gives us things like Teams, which is helping keep everyone together and get them collaborating. We have a version of Jive, which brings a lot of the defence community together who don't have corporate devices. So they've got their community social conversations and activity going on that platform. We also use IdeasUK, which was originally for ideas management. So how we run our sort of ideas program and call some of our innovation projects and stuff. That's proved to be quite adaptable. So people are now receiving work taskings through it. So they can say when they've done something, upload the documents. And then a member of the team who's got access to the core systems can then move those documents into core. So that's proving quite useful. Then we're making use of Zoom for team meetings so that everyone can see each other and have that sort of connectivity that way through. We use Skype internally to keep things for meetings and all that sort of stuff. And then WhatsApp for non-business conversations between teams and the wider team and updates and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's probably the key tools which we're using at the moment.
A bit of the myriad opportunities for us and a tool that can probably suit most of our needs. I noticed, Glenn, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to add something?
I just seen in the answer, like someone mentioned the use of Miro for the hackathons, and yeah, that's the tooling that I alluded to earlier for the design sprints that we do. So it's something I'd say more than just video conferencing where you can look at Blackboard, but it is actually a proper tool built for that. So we've had some good experience with that.
Great, thank you. There is a specific question, Dave, talking around what you mentioned around security. The question is, we've been asked to, I think, remove Zoom from our, to uninstall Zoom for security reasons. Could you please give us the latest on Zoom security upgrades? Thanks.
Absolutely, it's a great question, and I'm pleased to address that here. So first things first, Zoom takes security and privacy very seriously. We always have done, and right now in this, we also recognise now that with increased usage and attention on us, it's also naturally attracting a lot of scrutiny as well, which is great. You know, let's welcome that and embrace it. So to do that justice, I propose I'd love to have a chat to that person directly to help them address any specific concerns they've got, but all the way up to our CEO tonight. He'll be doing his second of his live webinar series in which he is inviting the entire security community to talk directly to him, address concerns as he lays out, as he started last week, the 90-day plan around how we're addressing and making changes to things. Already, you've seen responses within 24 to 48 hours, so product changes to some of these concerns raised, many of which are really putting the existing security controls front and center in front of people, so they're better able to manage, but they're existing security measures nonetheless in that respect. So it's really important to note that there's a huge level of security there. We've made it more evident for people because let's consider the users now. We've gone from being really an enterprise dedicated tool in the corporate space to anybody and everywhere. More than 90,000 schools are using Zoom globally. So these are users that aren't always used to this. And back to this specific question, it may be from your IT department that you have a corporate tool of choice today, a mandated tool, which many do, and that's great. And Zoom just may not be that tool today. So it might be, hey, use the tool that IT have mandated because that's what we're responsible for versus you know, a tool that may be being used heavily, and you know, we pride ourselves on our frictionless, easy to use tool, but at the same time, if it's not the IT approved tool, they shouldn't be using it until IT have approved it. So great to understand more about that. Happy to engage directly with the person that submitted that question. It could fall into a few different categories.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. So this one has taken a slight change of tact, and Paul, I'm going to ask you to comment first on this. So there's a question that's come in. It says, we are trying to do the same method of work digitally that we did before the lockdown. So working set number of hours, taking a break, etc. Is there any advice around how to help with working digitally, but outside of using the digital tools? So I guess, how can we adapt ourselves and be more open, I guess, to different patterns of working? So your thoughts around that, Paul?
Okay, so it's a great question, and thank you, Zena. Sorry, I didn't see who asked the question, but I think the first thing I'd say is that actually my experience, and actually I'm a big fan of Zoom. I use Zoom a lot, and I like the digital tools. But my experience of using digital tools is it's actually it's harder work, and so anybody that's been expected to do the same volume, I think I'd have a question around that. So I think actually, first of all, let's acknowledge that people are working in a different way. I think recognize that working with digital comes with its different challenges, but also some great opportunities. So I think I would be looking at time management. I think I'd be really clear on, first of all, thinking about how I manage my energy for the day. And when I think about energy, that might sound a little bit airy-fairy to some, but while I talk about energy, I think about, your physical, your intellectual, your emotional, and your spiritual energy. And think about your physical energy. What's going on for you during the day, and put a plan in place to take breaks. And so if you know that you've got a conference coming up or a WebEx, think about when that is and where you need to be physically and emotionally, how prepared you need to be. So have you planned some time? Have you read of other things that might be coming at you? From an emotional space, what else is going on for you, and how can you, if you like, take that to one side and park it so that you're not into situation response. And I'll give an example of that. Actually, I had an email this morning from my accountant telling me about my tax that was due, and all of a sudden it was oh goodness, hadn't planned for that. And then I had to literally sort of like go, okay, that's bothering you. I'm now in, I'm if you like, I've been triggered. I need to put that to one side and deal with it. So I diarise some time physically in my diary. And I think that's the big thing. It's about having a timeline that you're dealing with. We're not used to working like this, but I would use your diary, map out some time, and be proactive in mapping out some time to physically take some time away from work, to either go for a walk, to manage your physical energy, and also to deal with things that might be taking your mind, so that you can deal with it in blocks. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's great. There's a specific question for Stuart, actually, and I guess it comes back to the environment that you're working in. What's been the biggest hurdle working remotely in such a security policy-driven workplace?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'd say the biggest hurdle is accessibility. So I think anybody who has worked in a department like defence would be aware that we have a number of security classifications and restrictions on who can see what information and all that sort of stuff. So that's presented some relatively unique challenges for remote access. We are quite fortunate in that the Defence Board are very understanding of the current situation, and where things are not a critical priority, they are being left to one side, so we can focus on critical priorities such as the Nightingale builds and things like that, and open support to the NHS and the health service. But where things do require that access, we have some solutions in place which allow a small number of people to work in those areas. But then we also have some establishments who are still open and operating, where people are going into those places of work, and then obviously dealing with the joy of social distancing when they're in a work environment that wasn't really built for it. So there are a number of unique challenges, but we're working our way through it, and we're thankfully still able to deliver all of our outputs that we're expected to deliver in those areas.
Great, Thanks, Stuart. So we've got a question. Innovators working on a wide range of projects will more likely have to prove their value to the business in more immediate ways. So I think this talks to kind of the speed of change. How do you think they can do this? And Glenn, I'll ask you that question.
So if you look at what many of the members in the audience have actually been pushing for, and Whitespace have been suggesting, it's things like challenge status quo, design thinking, rapid prototyping, feel fast, collaboration with other corporate startups, the community. Those are all the kind of things that are required right now, more so than ever. What is different is that a lot of companies would have a view of this change happening over a year to 5 years is now a month to 5 months, or even like a week to 5 weeks. So it's so all the things that people have been pushing for and trying to change internally is like what exactly needs to happen right now. It's just being condensed, and a lot of corporates are being forced to work on the kind of timeframes that startups are used to working in, basically having a 1 week, 5 week visibility window, and they're not used to that. But the people pushing for innovation have been the ones thinking like that for a long time. So if they can be empowered and they can actually make that change, then I think they're in a really good position to be the ones to react to this in a good way.
Great, thanks, Glenn. We'll take another question from the audience. So working from home and collaboration works really well for some things. For example, a kind of broadcast webinar like we're doing now, and also for quite small team meetings and training, but perhaps not so well for other things. So larger workshops, larger conversations, even maybe breakouts. What should we be working on? How do we facilitate some of those alternate types of collaboration? And Dave, perhaps I'll aim that at you to start with.
Sure, thank you. So I guess let's think about it now. In many scenarios, there's no choice. Any of these workshops, these large events, they have to go online, and we're working at an incredible pace with a lot of our global customers and organizations whose sole business is on running events from various different locations around the world. They're all having to go online. We ourselves run many of our events now where we would have met with people face to face. We're having to push them online. So it's really an opportunity to start to think about being creative and innovative. What can I do differently here that I couldn't have done face to face? Can I get to more people? Can I control my message in a better way? By no means am I suggesting that it's a better way to do things than face to face. No, but it's still a great and effective way to do things, and you can still collaborate really effectively. We have our online events consulting team within Zoom who are helping some customers plan, in some instances, 24-hour-long events that are covering 3 continents with tens of thousands of attendees into them. It's absolutely happening. People are doing this and they're being very successful with this. Is it different? Yes. Is it what they would have wanted to do versus bringing face to face? Probably not. But at the same time, they're still managing to function. They're still being effective, and they're still driving their businesses forward and supporting their members and customers to do the same. So as harsh as it is, there's very little choice right now. We innovate and we change, or we're going to struggle, and the tools are here to help us innovate and change. And again, to touch on some of the comments some of the panel have made, taking into consideration the individuals involved and their feelings and their ability to be successful. But once we can cover those pieces, you can still drive large scale workshop and events. Functionality built into our platform, for example, allows breakout rooms. So you could have a team of 20 developers and break them into 4 groups of 5, let them do their project, bring them all back in. Our customers have actually been doing this for several years now, not just to reduce costs or environmental impact, but also to increase the frequency with which they can run such large scale collaborative workshops. So it's totally possible, and we can help.
Great, thanks, Dave. So another question is around quite specific, but around running a design sprint. I know you've already talked slightly to design sprints, Glenn, but what tips do you have for how we set this up and run it remotely?
So tooling, basically obvious. Just a plain video conferencing is not going to work unless you have a separate video on a whiteboard or something tool like that. So get your tooling, practice with that, do a couple of dry runs, particularly if it's the first one to actually do. Also timing. It can be hard, and alluding to some of the points of people have difficult schedules these days. So blocking out, let's say, 8 hours or 6 or 7 hours of a full day might just not be possible. And it's also hard to keep up that concentration. So smaller, more digestible chunks as well. And yeah, apart from that, it's the same old good practice. Define your roles, define the criteria of what you want to solve and what that will actually come out, and try to keep, even though it is remote, just the regimented in place of like clear deliverable outcomes, and try to keep it focused. But yeah, agree. As I alluded to earlier, that is probably the most difficult part, where you don't have those post-it notes and going around a whiteboard. But yeah, get the tooling right, practice, and keep it shorter and focused. And spread over a number of days, I suppose.
Right. And I guess to all of you, it's not just the setup, but it's keeping that momentum going when we've got lots of other, I guess, pools on our time. So what to any of you, this one is, so you might want to put your hand up of who wants to answer first, but what are your top tips for keeping that momentum going to make sure those projects really do kind of almost go at the speed that required in this point and situation we're in currently? Stuart, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So for us, it's better use of deadlines. So there are a number of tasks which this needs to be done by, and the deadlines were quite vague. What we have found over the last 5 or 6 weeks is that setting specific deadlines for pieces of work keeps that momentum going, and that coupled with the understanding that people will work at different times of the day, in different work patterns and everything else to fit in around their other commitments, helps people manage their workloads, as well as managing the expectations what output is going to be delivered and where.
You know, that's people hate to say, but you know, that's that seek to understand before being understood. You know, understand what's going on for people and help them understand what can come out of the diary in order to focus on the thing that might be urgent and important. And I think it's really helping people understand what's important for them and what's important for us and where we align. So I think it's helping people find that time so that they're not doing everything all at once.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And I'm going to stick with you, Paul, because there's a couple more questions around whether we should be looking to Myers-Briggs profiles and emotional intelligence profiles when we're kind of co-creating and collaborating together. And also whether there's a risk that this digital working means we miss some of the emotional cues, which is what you talked to earlier. So maybe you can talk a little bit to that. So actually, first of all, I noticed that it was Steve Palaka that asked one of those questions, and I want to say hello to Steve because he's a former colleague. So it's nice to have got a question for Steve. I think that's such an important question around communication, because I think for people of my age, then we will, you know, certain people have different preferences in the way they communicate. You know, I love to communicate face to face. You know, I'm quite yellow in my colours and sights. For those people, I lead with the heart, I engage with the heart, and so I like to see people, and I'm quite touchy-feely. We know that there are physical impacts of not being able to see people physically, but I think we also miss very subtle clues. We're programmed to notice things. Our 5 senses are attuned, and clearly that is missed on Zoom. And so I do use other tools. I've got one I could share if I'm allowed to share my screen. I think there's lots of little things that we can start to bear with. If I can, this is the one. Okay, so if I just, can everybody see that? So I think there's, can you see that, Zena? Yeah, the jelly bean tree.
Yeah, so little things that I think we can help people with by just giving them an opportunity to describe how they're feeling. So if we can't see it, we don't pick up the subtle clues. We have opportunities to allow people to tell us a story. So when we're checking in, so I would use this as just to help me understand which jelly baby you are. You know, tell me the story of that jelly baby. you know, and that might, you know, if you're number 9, the guy at the top, you're saying, actually, I'm feeling brilliant. I've enjoyed having some time away from work, etc., etc. But for other people, it might be that actually I'm feeling like I'm barely hanging on. And now you're asking me to, you know, there's an urgent and important piece to move this project forward, but actually being able to share this as a leader, if I'm aware of that, then that gives me an opportunity to reflect on that and whether that's the right person to do that next task, or whether there's something I can do or the team can do to support that person. So I think it's just about thinking about the other tools and opportunities that we have, but being awake to the fact that there are things that are going on that we won't get those subtle clues. So look for other information. I think having a check-in, or when you schedule your meeting, you know, is the meeting to talk about something operative, or is it actually, we haven't had a chance to talk, you know, how are things, you know, just that subtle check-in. I'm not sure I answered the other questions, Zena, so apologies. Could you repeat it?
No, it was just about, I guess, about using some of the Myers-Briggs and just paying attention to people's styles, whether it's, you know, insights or Myers-Briggs or emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So I think all of those tools are really helpful. And I think the more information we have, you know, but again, it's time. And I think it's time to reflect on that and remind ourselves of where people might be and what that might be doing for them.
Great. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul. So I'm flipping down to the last question that's just come in, actually. And I guess this is to the guys that have teams. So I know that Stuart's keen to answer it, but I also, Dave, Glenn, if you've got comments on this. But what's been, I guess, the biggest challenge or the most disruptive issue that you've had to resolve? And how have you resolved that when working remotely, or to be able to work remotely? Stuart?
Yeah, so I think probably the most disruptive for my team is their desire to be working. So the first week, they were all working too many hours. They were trying to do too many things. They were trying to make up for being at home, not in the office. All of those sort of cliche type behaviours, and it was that trying to make sure they understood that when the defence board turned around and pointed out to everybody, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And that we needed to maintain everyone's health at home, make sure they were happy and they could do the work that we needed to do, not necessarily the work that they felt they needed to do. So the first week was quite hard, particularly for the guys who are more extroverted. So I did read a meme right at the beginning, which was aimed at introverts, of telling them to look after extroverts because they're really going to be needing the support during this time. And we sort of lived through that in the first week or so. Some of the team are quite extroverted and they did struggle to start with. And I think some of them are still struggling, but not so much now. So that's probably been our biggest disruption. And it's that whole making sure you have that contact with them face to face where you can through video. Allow my team to call me whenever they need to call me, whatever they need to talk about. If they need to call, then they've got my number. They can call me whenever.
Thanks, Stuart. Dave?
I think Stuart makes some great points there. And I think, you know, some of the questions coming in, people have talked about how to adjust to this kind of new working environment, or maybe not being in the office. Someone referred to being measured by output, not necessarily working hours or what have you. And I think, you know, there's a huge piece of trust. This is such a beautiful chance to really establish some strong trust within teams and across dispersed teams. My team's spread across Europe now. So trust is vital always in these situations. Knowing and letting your team know that, you know what, I know you're working such a super high rate. I know that you've got some real early hours things to do, some late evening things to do. So do you know what, if you need to take an hour or 2 out in the day to, in the old days, hey, you could go and get your hair cut, or you could go and do these things. I know you can't do that now, but if you need to take some time out to be with your kids, to walk the dog where you're permitted to walk the dog, or whatever it may be, go and do that. Because the 9 to 5 piece is, it's difficult to maintain that right now. To Stuart's point, some people really want to show that they are working, because there's often a common, I think, misconception that if you're not in the office, you're not working. I truly don't buy into it. You know, I've worked for companies that have allowed me to be remote for such a long time, and one of them had a beautiful tagline that work is something you do, not somewhere you go. I've always believed that. You know, you can do your work, you can be accountable, you can produce the outcome and achieve your objectives in whatever way works best for you. And now more than ever, we really need to publicize that to our teams, that, hey, make it work for you. I trust that you're going to do the right thing. I trust that you're going to meet the needs of the project, the customers, or whatever it may be. Make it work for you around that. Give them that trust. And it's such a great thing to see that trust reciprocated and really delivered upon.
And I think that really acts to empower people as well. And so they actually want to deliver. So yeah, they may not be able to work in the morning because they really need to do homeschooling with their child, but maybe they put in an hour in the evening to make up for that. So it is about finding, I guess, new ways that we can work with the scenario that we've all been given. So I'm going to, as I'm conscious it's 11:45, I'm going to now start focusing towards the future and what good stuff is coming out that we think we'd like to keep going forward. So the first question that came in that's at the top of the question list, what trends do you each think will outlive the current crisis? So how will the working world look after lockdown and social distancing? So I know this is a bit of crystal ball gazing, but equally we can already see some different trends emerging. So who would like to go first from our panelists with that question? I'm not seeing a rush for takers.
Shall I jump in then?
Everyone took this. Stuart. Oh, Glenn, we're going to Glenn.
Well, one thing is that I think obviously that not all travel is necessary. You can be productive working from home. People will question those face-to-face meetings, what's actually required, which is close to my heart since being based in Belfast, and before the lockdown I was over in London every week. And if you think of the mentioned before that sometimes you do miss a lot of clues, and sometimes nothing can beat a face-to-face meeting, but people will be questioned about whether all those are actually necessary and whether you can get on with business without those. So that'll have an environmental impact. It'd be interesting to see in the next couple of years what actually happens to the winter travel. And there's also an upside to productivity with that. Again, thinking selfishly and personally, the amount of hours I was traveling per week and not being as productive because it was on a flight or a train or traveling, and we can reclaim those either be more productive in those or reclaim those from your personal life, so you're not getting up at 5 a.m. to make that or 9 a.m. meeting in a different building. So I think that will be definitely one that will change in the next couple of years.
Great. And Stuart?
Yeah, so I think I would echo that. I think before this pandemic and the lockdown, the biggest challenge we were looking forward to resolving was net zero 2050 and what defence needed to do in order to drive down our greenhouse gas emissions. So I think off the back of that, we sort of knew that remote meetings, reduction of travel, and all of those sort of things would be relatively easy wins, but finding a trigger for that behaviour was sort of escaping us. So I think every silver lining has a cloud, and I think this is demonstrating to a lot of those unbelievers that you don't need to travel to meetings, and you can trust people and you can manage and appraise people on their outputs rather than whether they are presenting themselves in the office or not. Sort of going back to what Dave said, work is about something we do, not somewhere where we go. We have a mix of seniors who believe that and don't believe that, and I think this is demonstrating that actually it is the case. Work is something, it's what we do, not where we go. So hopefully that's going to stick.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And Dave?
And just adding into that as well, I think we've seen some fantastic enhancements around efficiencies, the decisions and the actions that have had to be taken at great pace now that previously could have been a years long debate and to and fro around should we, shouldn't we, what do we do? And actually cutting through to the crucial pieces. I've seen, I recall early on in this, we worked with the university in Northern Italy, who I think at 7:30, 7:40 in the morning on a Saturday, were processing through getting their accounts set up and established. And by Monday morning, 8 a.m., they started the first of, I think, 3,000 exams that week that they conducted for all of their students who had to be on lockdown at home. Like, they moved in such a fast-paced period that if you'd have talked about doing that 3 months ago, nobody would have believed it possible. Some of our biggest global enterprise customers have truly transformed by taking their entire workforce and putting them at home. And they were true office-based organizations. It was traditional, it was their culture, that's how they did it. But they've just picked these people up and put them all at home with all of the tools and applications to allow them to function and to keep their customers happy and successful as well. And the efficiencies that had to be achieved to make that happen at such fast pace are incredible. And I think Stuart touched on it. Some of these things would have been very different or very hard to achieve with a lot of doubters and naysayers maybe historically. And we've just proved that these things are possible and that actually there's some beautiful benefits to this as well. And to the question about what might be different in the future, I'm going to refer to just some of the amazing things we're seeing just on our platform, but it's across multiple platforms. The Queen celebrated her birthday on Zoom yesterday. The Parliament, we all know, is using Zoom today, for example, but more than that. My friends are running bingo and pub quizzes of an evening on Zoom. I've got family members that are checking in on each other and keeping in touch in ways that we talked about knowing we should do, but we never did. And we've just realized, you know what, I can so easily see my relatives or see my friends, that they're at the back of my mind. Friends are like stars. You don't need to see them to know that they're there, but they are there. And when you see them, it's better. And now we're really seeing each other. We're really taking the time and the effort to slow down, communicate, and keep communicating. It's so important. And I think we moved so fast before, we didn't always move efficiently. I think we've improved the efficiency. We've slowed down some of the haste, and we're actually having more meaningful and beneficial communications and collaborations now. I think they're huge positives that aren't just going to disappear, nor should they.
Thanks, Dave. And finally to Paul, which kind of is a nice place to come in after some of the stuff that Dave just mentioned.
So thank you, Zena. I think it's a really good question. And for me, I think this is a really great opportunity for us to really think about culture. And when I think about remote working, I'm always reminded that actually remote's an adjective that often means that we have little connection or relationship to. And I think probably a lot of us have thought about our connections and our relationships over the last few weeks, those people that we are not able to see. And today's point, actually those people that actually we thought we couldn't see, but actually now we're getting used to digital, we can see. So I think I'm hoping what we will see is people being more alert to the relationships that they want to have, being more thoughtful about their own place emotionally, spiritually, physically, intellectually, and how they want to come across. And because this is new stuff, we need to practice it. And so we probably need to be a bit more alert and more practicing of how we communicate with people and how we make people feel. So I think there's something here for us all to think about the relationships that we want and the things that we value, because obviously there's certain things that we are used to getting from work that suddenly we're disconnected from. And maybe it's also taken to us a place where we're now acknowledging the things that we didn't know we missed because we just was sailing by. And so I think we've got this opportunity to be a little bit more awake. And what I'm hoping is when we get back to work, in a normal environment, what we don't miss is that opportunity to manage and foster those great relationships and think about the connections that we want to keep.
Thanks, Paul. And I guess that brings up some really big questions. I could see one of the first questions that came in was about WeWork. Should they be rethinking their whole business model in 2020-21? Glenn, might you want to comment on that?
Well, they probably were rethinking the whole business model even before this, but if you look at their target market, which is startups and kind of scale-ups, those are the ones that have had, from a day-to-day perspective, the least friction in actually to work from home. A lot are struggling because of investment and their business model, but with regards to ongoing the operations, they've been fine. So I think they're going to come to consideration that they can save a lot on expensive London rents if they can continue to work from home. So yeah, I think that part of the tech industry is going to there's going to be lasting effects there.
Thanks, Glenn. So I've got one quick one for Dave, and then I'll ask one question for all of the panel. But Dave, it's one that I'm intrigued by. So somebody's popped on here 2 years ago. Some of my friends tried to use Zoom and nobody really knew about Zoom 2 years ago. What is it about Zoom that now we're all talking it, we're all using it. You seem to be the perfect person to answer that question for us.
Well, I'm pleased you asked it. I saw it in there and I didn't want it to get missed. So thank you for that. I mean, I knew about Zoom 2 years ago, and as did
Yeah, of course.
hundreds of thousands of customers globally. And that's the thing. We were seeing huge success in the corporate and in the enterprise space particularly, and that success, and there's a lot of players in the space, they're all amazing, but a lot of our success was down to the innovation we'd built into our platform, the ease of use, and most importantly, and this is really where we're seeing this amplified now, the reliability and the stability, purely based on how Zoom is architected and how it works. And I think that's where we're really seeing this growth now. We're super proud to be that platform of choice for just video collaboration, be it me talking to my mom or my kids talking to their teacher, my kids doing kickboxing classes online, for example. Yeah, they're doing all that stuff, church services online, and that's all driven by, as anyone knows in the design space, user experience, like that effective, easy to use user experience, and the fact that it works and is stable and available to all, as demonstrated by, as we've joked about it, Zena, but your connection where you are, for example, you're here, we can see you, you look great,
Yeah.
we can hear you. That's phenomenal. And Zoom's just facilitating that at incredible scale as well. Our CEO has talked very readily about the increase in the usage we've experienced and our number of users every day. I think it's over 20 times what we would have seen normally. So I would say what's really made it successful is it's simple and easy to use, and it works. People might think that sounds lightweight, but imagine not having either of those factors, then it's not a viable solution.
Great, thank you. So my very last question, and I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to be very brief with their answer. But what is your one top tip for effective remote working and virtual team collaboration? Glenn, to you first. Your one top tip.
So I think I mentioned the tooling, etc., but software engineering is actually, there's a large social element to it as well. One, from the problem solving that you would have over coffee or like a chat. A lot of problems get unblocked that way, just from that. So I think having those social check-ins, and we've had extra, less rigid stand-ups and more casual chats, is important. And also office banter is missing. So I think it's important to keep those social sides up. So not everything needs to be regimented, just giving some time just to talk nonsense with the rest of the team, because that's really useful.
Thanks. And Paul, I guess you'd echo that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a lovely comment, actually. I think it's just to remember that people are there. And also I think about stress. Think about how we respond to stress. And I think I would flag really early on, that things go wrong, and if things go wrong, we're not going to be, we're not concerned. It would give you not permission, but people don't need a chastising parent or that extra sort of stress of thinking, oh my God, I've lost connection. We've accepted it, we expect it, but remember there's people at the end of it.
Dave, last 30 seconds from you.
Just keep talking, stay in contact, embrace the change in the tools that you have to use, take advantage of being able to see each other, and just keep those lines of communication all the time, professionally and personally. It's so valuable. Everybody's in this together, everybody's going through the same, and we're all at different stages of acceptance. So keep that talking, it will help you, it'll help your team.
Thanks. And finally, Stuart.
Yeah, so coffee roulette. So we put coffee roulette into place. So you will randomly draw another person from the wider military capability area, and you put 15 minutes aside to the day. You have a telephone call, or you have a coffee, and you just talk about anything not work related. So it sort of breaks up the day, takes some of the stress away, and also introduce you to people you wouldn't normally meet because it's completely random.
Thanks, Stuart. So thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to Whitespace, and I hope you've all found that really interesting. I know that it's been really great being part of this conversation. So Lauren, I think you're going to just close off with a few words.
A huge thank you guys to all of you. It's been great, and I've learned a lot, as well as being part of this as well. As per all our meetings, everything will be summarised and written up and shared to everybody who has attended. We're also going to upload it live, so you will be able to go back over and capture your answers if you weren't able to actually get them live. So keep an eye out for that. I'm also going to try and work through the 10 open questions that we've got on the left and try and get some answers to everybody, because I appreciate that time meant that not every question could be asked. But a huge thank you to everybody who is on the panel, a huge thank you to everybody who came along, and I hope everybody has a lovely day and enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.